Okay, thank you very much, Shivani, and hello everyone. It's very good to have this opportunity to speak to you. We wish we could be there with you, but it's very good to be able to share the work that we have done on the Commonwealth Games, both in terms of monitoring the violations and also in terms of developing strategies to counter the violations that have taken place. So I'm just going to review a few key areas where we think that you will be able to from which you will be able to benefit for the enormous work that remains before you, before the World Cup and the Olympics. The first point that we wanted to make is that it's very important to monitor where the public funds are coming from. In the case of the Commonwealth Games, the entire cost of the Games came from public money. As Shivani explained, 7 to 15 billion was spent from public money, from taxpayers' money. And it took us a long time, and still investigations are going on to find out where was the money taken from, and if that money had not been used for the Games, what would the money have been used for? In fact, in our work, we found that funds had been diverted from social welfare programs to be used in infrastructure for the Games. So it's very important to carry out detailed budgetary analysis of the funds, where they've come from, what they're going into, and to question different parts of the government as to where the money is coming from. The second area which we found useful, and in fact we are still doing that work, is to map the evictions that are going to take place in Rio. Given the nature of Rio, certainly a number of favelas and other areas will be affected. It's very important to document the communities that are likely to be evicted. It's very important to carry out human rights education in these communities and to mobilize the communities and in fact civil society groups and others across the city to resist evictions. The third area is to call right away for compliance with labor laws. As Shivani was explaining, there were gross violations of labor laws of the laborers that were working on the infrastructure and the stadiums for the Commonwealth Games. So it's important to ensure that the labor standards that are followed comply with national law in Brazil, they comply with international standards, and to use the education process that you will all now be starting with the communities to spread awareness about labor laws. You know, when we started our work, it was only a few months before the Games took place, the Commonwealth Games. But you have several years ahead of you, several years of very important work. And given the experience of mega events across the world, where almost without exception there have been very negative economic and social consequences, including serious human rights violation, we feel that it would be, you might want to consider actually calling for a global boycott of the Games. This could be done along with groups from different parts of the world. It could be done through the media. You could call for particular action against the Brazilian government, and you may want to consider, even at a personal level and at a level of different organizations, to call for a boycott. The other area which is very important, where again we are still continuing work, is to ensure that existing policies that are there in Brazil and the international human rights law are implemented for vulnerable groups. So you have to ensure that people living in the favelas, people who are homeless, the street children, that they all have security of tenure, that as soon as possible people have their rights, so that they will be able to counter the violations that will be taking place, and they'll be able to speak out against the negative policies that are almost certain to come because of both the World Cup and the Olympics. One of the strategies that we found very useful was the whole issue of coalition building. Whenever there is such a mega event, it's very important for groups that are working on human rights, development, environment, children's rights to come together and to speak with a common voice. We also were able to organize almost on a weekly basis press conferences to inform the media about the information that had been coming out about the violations that were taking place, and to gradually build up media interest in the negative social and economic impact of the Commonwealth Games. And through that, we actually learned to make strategic use of the media. We were able to mobilize also, in addition to the local and the national media, with the international media, which took great interest in the other side of the games, in looking at violations. And then we were able to sustain that interest when the games actually took place. And even after the games, there's been very intense reporting in the Indian media about the negative dimensions of the games. The other aspect that we worked on was to take maximum advantage of the independent institutions that exist in the country. We have a institution called the Controller and Auditor General, which audits all accounts of all government agencies. We were able to inform them about the diversion of funds for the games. We were able to use other independent institutions, and we were able to mobilize with members of parliament who actually raised the issue about accountability and transparency in parliament. We were able to mobilize with different political parties, and that has proved to be very important. And we were able to use available mechanisms. India has a very powerful Right to Information Act, which makes it possible for an individual or a civil society organization or anyone to ask for, within a time-bound period, to ask for official information. We were able to get official budgets. We were able to get minutes of very important meetings, which we then released to the media, which we then, released, made available to parliamentarians and so on. And that gave our work, that has given our work a lot of credibility, because what we are speaking about is not based on something that we saw in a newspaper or on television or something that we heard, but based on official information to which the government had no choice but to respond, because it was their own information that was being used to expose the wrongdoing that was taking place. We also published many documents, a major report a few months before the games. We published small brochures. We regularly had press, in addition to the press conferences, we had press releases, which we were able to reach out to a very large group. We built up a very strong media list and a very strong list of people across the city in Delhi, and we were able to regularly reach information. What is also very important, and this is where there has been a major failure in India, and you have time now to ensure that this doesn't happen in Rio, it's very important to demand that there is an economic and social legacy plan for the World Cup and the Olympics. What is going to happen to the infrastructure that is built? What is going to happen to the laborers that come to build the infrastructure? What is going to happen to all the the people who are affected by displacement, for example, by evictions? Is there going to be a resettlement policy? How are the funds, the enormous amount of funds that will come into Rio, how are they going to be used also to have a positive impact, particularly on the poor segments of the society? And given the fact that both FIFA and the International Olympic Committee have regulations. The International Olympic Committee has very strict guidelines. I think it's very important for all of you to start already demanding accountability and transparency of different government sectors, perhaps the private sector, to comply with the International Olympic Committee guidelines. And most important, I think, if there is strident and consistent work on publicizing whatever wrongdoing takes place, whatever human rights violations there are, whatever economic mistakes that are being made, if there is a great escalation of costs, for example, is to publicize that and to compare it and contrast it with national and international policies. And I think that if you're all able to do that, I'm sure the damage that, the human impact in Rio, we hope will be less than what we have been through in Delhi. It's been very good to speak to you, and we hope to remain in touch and hope to continue to be of assistance in the struggle that you are all just beginning. Thank you very much.